Good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Veterans Voices. I'm Nathan Johnson, here with my co-host, Kevin Graves.
How you doing, Nathan? Good to see you. The title of tonight's program is Stellate Ganglion Block, a second shot. You may recall that in October, we started the conversation around this pioneering procedure with local doctors and veterans. We look forward to taking a deeper dive with the researchers that started using the procedure to treat veterans diagnosed with PTSD. We will be right back.
Thanks for being with us. Happy holidays. Today is December 17th, 2018. Again, I'm Nathan Johnson, the Contra Costa County Veterans Service Officer. Veterans Voices is committed to serving the community by educating our viewers about veterans issues and providing resources to vets and their families. Our hope is to make television part of the solution. Up next, we have some very special guests that we were able to remotely connect with to talk about stellate ganglion block. Let's take a look. Dr. Lipov and Dr. McLean, thank you both for joining us today from Chicago and from Hawaii. Before we get started on the conversation about stellate ganglion block, tell us a little bit more about yourselves. Dr. Lipov, why don't you start, sir?
Sure. My name is Eugene Lipov. I'm a physician practicing Chicago pain medicine in Chicago for the last 27 years.
Well, thank you. Dr. McLean, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, aloha. I'm Brian McLean. I do anesthesia and interventional pain management at Triple Army Medical Center. And I've been here in Hawaii for quite a while now.
Well, thank you both again for joining us. A very important conversation, stellate ganglion block. And Dr. Lipov, you are the pioneer of the use of stellate ganglion block for the use of post-traumatic stress. Can you tell us a little bit about the story behind your theory?
Sure. Actually, I was fortunate enough to be able to predict the effect. So if you don't mind, I'll give you the background. So this whole story of using stellate ganglion block for other indication than conventional started actually with hot flashes. I had a patient who had a severe hot flashes that I sent to my brother, who's an internist, and he tried to treat her hot flashes, and he could not do it. And then he said, why don't you treat her doing a stellate ganglion block? The reason he thought that would work is because there is a condition that Dr. McLean, I'm sure very familiar with. It's called CRPS, which is burning of the extremity. And his hypothesis was that if you have a burning extremity and burning everywhere, it's the same thing. So we did the injection, it worked very well, which was really a surprise to me. And then we did a number of other injections like that and worked very well. And then there was a paper written about me, about using it that way in 2005, and they were very negative, shall we say. The main complaint was I had no idea how it worked. So they said, since you don't know how it worked, you really shouldn't be doing that because it's really not ethical, not appropriate, whatever. So that led me to read about 3,000 articles, try to figure out the mechanistics of it. One of the articles was from Finland, where they did clipping of sympathetic chain in the chest for hand sweating, and they found that PTSD stopped. So now I was quite curious about that, and I went back and I looked at the anatomy of T2 sympathetic chain, which also spread to the neck. T2 is about here. Those nerves seem to go up to the neck and up to the brain. And then I thought the procedure there should help PTSD, like what happened in Finland. And then the first patient I treated was, again, my brother's patient who was assaulted, and he was on his way to be admitted to a psychiatric institution. We did the injection. He did not need to be admitted. That's how it all started.
Wow.
Now, when you first thought about this in treating post-traumatic stress, did you have veterans in mind, or was it the general population who suffers from post-traumatic stress?
Well, both. I have spent 4 years as a VA resident. I did 2 years of general surgical VA work in Chicago and 2 years anesthesia. Also, my father was a veteran from World War II, and he had severe PTSD. So I always had a lot of interest helping the veteran. Also, I did a lot of time as a trauma surgeon in Cook County Hospital. We saw a lot of abused women, and a lot of those women, especially after sexual attack, develop PTSD.
Okay, so Dr. McLean, can you tell us how you found out about stellate ganglion block as a possible treatment for PTS symptoms and what the story is behind that?
Sure. When I was at Walter Reed in Washington, D.C., I was doing interventional pain management and using the stellate ganglion block to treat patients with complex regional pain syndrome. A physician named Dr. Sean Mulvaney had some patients of his that had post-traumatic stress disorder that were having a lot of trouble with the standard treatment and medication. And he came to me and knew that I did this procedure, and he had seen Dr. Lipoff's case report and asked if I would be willing to try it for his patients. And so we discussed it with the patients, 2 of them, and offered the treatment for them, and had what I would consider miraculous, responses. So the patients had immediate and sustained benefit where they were able to get off their medications and have significant benefit with their post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. And from those couple of patients, we wrote the first case series with a military patient. And since then, I've continued to use it.
How long ago was that, Dr. McLean? How long have you been using stellate ganglion block for?
So I believe that was in 2008 or 2009. So I've been doing it for 9 to 10 years now.
Did you have any difficulty in getting that procedure approved with you're in the military, you're a military doctor. Sometimes the procedures, we're not encouraged to think out of the box sometimes. I know as doctors you probably are more than others, but did you have any problem in getting that approved or being able to move forward with that kind of research?
No, actually not at all. In fact, actually the military is one of the great places to practice medicine because you can truly do what you believe is best for the patient. You talk to the patient that the procedure may be experimental, may be off-label, but because we don't have to get it paid for through an insurance, we are able to offer what we think is best for the patient without having those types of issues. So it has been one of the things, in fact, in pain management, we've been able to do things like acupuncture and chiropractic and medical massage for patients that are very hard to get approved. Similarly, we can offer things to the patient. So it's been a great place for it to be used.
That's great.
We had our first show on this earlier this month in October, and my story was a little bit similar. I'm a psychologist, but one of my patients asked for this procedure. And so I worked with a pain management doc in the VA. And I remember fighting through a lot of personal fear that I would get punished or maybe even fired for doing something kind of experimental. So I'm just wondering if you could both speak to some of the external barriers and obstacles to people understanding and really looking at this procedure as a potential treatment for PTS.
Would you like to start?
Dr. Lipoff, why don't you start?
Sure. So the barriers have been significant, at least from my perspective. And in the private sector, it's interesting in a number of ways. The insurance has its own perspective. But I think one of the positive things about this, though, the easy part, a lot of people ask me about FDA approval. Do you have FDA approval to do this or not? I have a letter from FDA that basically stating that they really are not, they don't have a problem with this being done because stellate ganglion block is an old procedure. It's been done a long time. Interventional pain physicians such as myself and Dr. McLean both are experienced and we understand how to use it. The indication is new. So there have been a lot of pushback from psychiatric community, basically saying everything from what we're doing now works fine, which is hard for me to believe because the current therapeutics are really quite limited, I think, to acceptance, the whole concept that it's such an easy solution, meaning you can do an interventional injection and then patient leave in an hour feeling markedly better. One of my professor friends says you have a credulity problem. It's hard to believe that's even possible to do that. Also, since insurance doesn't cover it, We have a non-for-profit. We were able to treat so far about 50 veterans and active duty personnel through the non-for-profit, and we're always trying to get money to treat them. Some people do not want to be treated in military facility for multiple reasons, I think. So, but you know, the best results have been basically people who are registered and seeing their spouses light up on the phone afterward. In fact, right before they leave has been amazing.
And what about you, Dr. McLean? What have been some of the external barriers or obstacles for you?
Anytime you have something that's new and outside the box and not well done, you have skeptics, of course, which is why we've been trying to validate the procedure and perform studies on the procedure. The patients are very accepting of the procedure. So when I started, after I did those first initial couple patients, and I came to the Triple Army Medical Center, I went out and went to the behavioral health community and said, I'm here, I'm available to try this procedure for patients. And they were very skeptical of treating a psychiatric, what they considered a psychiatric condition with a very biomedical focused treatment. And so they were very, very skeptical of it. And so we went to our VA that was there. They would have an inpatient program, which was basically for patients, veterans, and active duty who had severe post-traumatic stress symptoms, and they had kind of failed the traditional therapies. And so that's where we started and had some good success with some very difficult cases. And after we had some successes there, and the physicians and psychiatrists that were managing those patients saw the benefit of the treatment, we started breaking down those barriers. And so now, whereas before we would not offer it until the patient had failed everything else there was to try for post-traumatic stress symptoms, now I have psychiatrists and psychologists and sending me the patients very early in their diagnosis. So after showing some successes and the providers seeing the success with their patients, that made them a believer. That was the break-in process.
We hope that you're enjoying this program as we learn more about stellate ganglion block directly from Dr. Lipoff and Dr. McLean, who are both responsible for bringing this procedure to veterans. Please stay with us as we continue this conversation after this brief video.
Thanks for the memory, you Uncle Sammy's crew. Our minutes are too few. I wish that I could kiss each and every one of you. You want to get us trampled to death, are you kidding? What's the matter, you blowing your roof or something? How about Mr. Jerry Colonna right here? Oh, thanks all you men dressed in khaki. You may think that I'm a bit wacky. Why don't you get back in the sacky? There's room for two. Your nose and you. Miss Patty Thomas right here, Miss Patty. Just sing a little ditty there, girl. Thanks for the memory. Just say thanks.
Thank you for the memory.
I hope you like that.
I hope you liked my dance and found it not too revolting. I was gonna bring my fans, but one of the fans was molting.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So gentlemen, you've obviously been getting good results because you continue to do this procedure for veterans with PTS. What have you learned since you first performed this procedure that has helped you get better results?
Sure. So I have performed this procedure quite a bit, and as you treat more patients, you get some indications now. The best indication of whether or not it works and exactly who it works for, how well it works, will come through validated research, which we are working on. But from my anecdotal experience of doing this for the past 9 years, what I found is that and how we talk to patients and how we talk to providers, is that we may not be curing this, but we are helping with the symptoms. Our goal is to help manage the symptoms so that hopefully the other treatments can work. So we don't do this as a standalone treatment. We certainly do it as part of a program and part of the standardized behavioral health care. So we always make sure that our patients are engaged in good quality care with a behavioral health provider, and we talk to them about this procedure, helping to reduce and manage their symptoms so that the other treatments can help. So I think that's critical. But the other critical thing is that we tell people that it's not necessarily a one-time and you're done. So what we've seen, even though everyone's a little different in how they respond, if a person is a responder to the treatment, in my experience, I've seen that they'll get a few weeks of relief with an initial injection, and sometimes need a repeat. And so we will offer them a repeat injection if the first injection gives them benefit, but then starts to wear off. And that's the same thing we see when we use this procedure for complex regional pain syndrome. We see that each one provides more benefit, a longer benefit each time. So you get kind of progressive benefit. We consider kind of a reset to this system. Kind of like when a light switch has been on too long, if you can turn it off, maybe it's back on. The next time you turn it off, it stays off for longer.
Interesting.
And Dr. Lipoff, what have you learned since first performing the procedure that has improved your results?
So I modified the procedure. So the way we do it is a little more than what Dr. McLean was talking about. So we had a patient, and I won't give you a long story, but essentially I do something called a sequential block. We do an injection at C6 to start with on the right side, and if they're not improved in 30 minutes, we do a higher level injection at C3, and that seems to increase success significantly.
We had one of the patients that you've done some consultation with, Chad Windsor, come on and talk about his experience. Tell me about the theory behind that modification with the C6 and the C3 a little bit more, if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd like to tell you a quick story how that came about. So basically, I had a patient that walked into my office, and he had severe PTSD and he was suicidal. And I asked him to be admitted. He refused to do so. Anyway, so we did the C6 injection, and it failed for him, meaning right after procedure, he didn't feel any different. So I took him back and I did a C3 block, and he walked out with no symptoms. So if you look at anatomically why that happens, sympathetic supply to the brain, especially the amygdala, seem to be from two ganglia, C6 and C3. So if you do C6 and it's not enough, then C3 should have a bigger reboot, shall we say.
Interesting.
Let me ask you this, either one of you. Do you find that there is a difference in the response of the patient from a time perspective? In other words, when the treatment occurs, for some, do they feel immediate relief of fight or flight, or can it be a longer response to it? Does it have to have outside input sometimes to occur? Or is it always an instantaneous result?
From my perspective, there's nothing in medicine. There's nothing is always or never. There's always a range, right? Most of the people who are going to respond do feel better within an hour. I would say in my practice, about 5% have a delayed response up to 5 days. I'd be very curious to see Dr. McLean's experience.
Dr. McLean.
Certainly, we see a lot of patients with a lot of different symptoms. Post-traumatic stress has multiple symptom clusters, and so patients are suffering from different symptoms within that post-traumatic stress symptom clusters. And so we've been offering it to patients regardless of what symptoms they have. And so the symptom that bothers them the most may not respond or respond differently. So as Dr. Lipoff said, if a patient has a very high fight or flight response, upregulation or activation of the sympathetic nervous system, and that is their presenting complaint, we do see that respond very quickly. But we have other patients who maybe don't feel that anxious but have anger or irritability, sleep problems, nightmares, and those can respond as well, surprisingly, but they may not respond. So a patient might not feel immediate relaxation, but then all of a sudden they're starting to sleep better at night and they have less nightmares. They'll come back and report that to us. So what I tell the patients is the treatment is done right away. The nerve block happens immediately, but then I ask them to keep a symptom diary for their behavioral health provider to find out what response they had to the procedure. And so some patients will feel calm right away, and then others may not notice until all of a sudden they're having better nights of sleep or having less irritability, less outbursts.
Now, I have seen some pretty amazing results with my patients. And still the research is, of course, coming in. One of the randomized trials that's coming out reported something that has me kind of scratching my head, and so I wanted to have you both speak to that. If I recall, it was that the SGB and the saline or sham injection both produced positive results. And I just wonder if you had any thoughts or theories on why that could be, given kind of what we've all seen. Dr. Lipov, you're smiling. Do you want to take this one first?
Sure. Well, you're referring to the Navy study that was done in a naval hospital. I am very familiar with that study. If you look at the literature, I have written some responses to the results. So the problem with that study, it has been analyzed by VA team as well. They felt the study was poorly done and the results were not really accurate. And there's a number of reasons for that. There are basically two. One is the injections didn't seem to have been done at the correct levels. Some of them were done with C5, some C6. The amount of medication was used was reduced for whatever the reason. But most importantly, the people this was done on were all seeking payment. So if they would report significant improvement, that they would lose that benefit. So that typically is not the best selection for the study. The study done by Dr. McLean and Dr. Mulvaney, I believe most of them were special ops people, and they just wanted to get better. I believe that's a much better sample.
So what would you recommend to someone who is considering stellate ganglion block? How do they know that they should make the decision to go forward with the treatment? And if they have made that decision, what can they do to best prepare themselves for successful results?
I can tell you how we do it. We always use something called PCL checklist, which is PTSD checklist, which is a pretty standard way to assess the diagnosis as well as efficacy of therapy. It's been used since the 80s. Dr. Koster, I think, came up with it originally. And this is how we assess it. I've been on TV a few times, so I usually have the patients watch my appearances and see the actual response from the patients. And I have one assistant that's been with me for 12 years, and they always call them and talk to them, and this is how we prepare the patients for it. But to me, I'm an invasivist, right? I'm an interventionist. So we used to doing regular procedures. This is not much different than preparing people for epidurals or implants. We tell the people about the risks and benefits. What's different here is the indications psychiatric. In fact, I was at the American Society of Anesthesiologists, and we presented the term psychoanesthesia, using anesthetic technique to produce psychiatric effect.
Dr. McLean, I'm curious to hear what some of the big obstacles may be sort of mentally or internally for soldiers in terms of this procedure. I know that we had spoken to a veteran last episode who talked about how SGB is maybe perceived by some to slow your reaction time, but he didn't find that that was true at all. But that's still a potential barrier. Can you talk to some of the potential barriers for soldiers?
Yeah, sure. So we've treated many different types of soldiers, from the special forces soldiers through retirees and veterans with this procedure. Dr. Sean Mulvaney was also part of a study where they tested the reaction time of special forces soldiers immediately after the stellate ganglion block, and found that it didn't decrease the reaction time. In fact, in a couple of them, it actually increased the reaction time. One of their concerns is that it will take away their edge. And so the way I speak to that is that we're not changing them. We're resetting the sympathetic nervous system back to its normal level. We're not decreasing it or dulling it out like a lot of medications do. we're performing a reset back to a more normal level of sympathetic activation, as opposed to being hyperactive. It's back to normal.
Thank you for that clarification.
That's so very interesting. Go ahead, Nathan.
Gentlemen, we're at the end of our segment here, but before we wrap up, Dr. McLean and then Dr. Lipoff, is there anything else that you'd like to share about this very important procedure, SGB, and treating post-traumatic stress symptoms?
Yeah, so I guess I would share that we do have additional studies coming out, but this procedure has been performed for many, many years by patients. The stellate ganglion block has been around since the 1920s, but it's only in the past 10 years or so that we've been doing it for alternative treatments such as post-traumatic stress. So although it has been around for a while, we're still having some studies come out to exactly show exactly who it's going to work for, exactly how long it works, and to show that it works. But that being said, we've treated many, many soldiers, many patients. Just to give you an example of numbers, just at RRR Medical Center, in the past 5 years, we've done this procedure for post-traumatic stress over 1,200 times, and it's being done safely at centers that know how to do the procedure. And it's a treatment option to discuss with their behavioral health provider to see if it can help improve their treatment outcome.
And Dr. Lipoff, what about you, sir?
I could not agree with Dr. McLean about his perspective on it. Further, I think it gives us a view that psychiatric condition is a biological condition. In fact, the term I try to use instead of PTSD is PTSI, post-traumatic stress injury. And I think if you look at that, it's biologic, it's easily acceptable by patients. So coming in, having an injection, and there is still some work to do, obviously, but it can also have other implications such as postpartum depression. I have used it there, and other implications like depression. I think it's just the beginning of an amazing field, and I'm just extremely proud that other people have had such great results. And also Dr. McLean, I believe, has done a patient, and they reported with Dr. Alino that they saved some from suicide or for marked improvement in suicidal ideation. I think as we go see more of that, I think it'd be great to see. And I think to remember that the block works within 30, 45 minutes. There's nothing else in psychiatry except for ECT or electrical shock therapy that works rapidly. So the rapidity of it and the acceptance by the patients, I think, is going to see this block become more accepted.
Well, gentlemen,
fantastic.
Thank you both for your time today, but more importantly, thank you for this important work that you're doing to treat our service members and our veterans and helping them with their symptoms of post-traumatic stress. So thank you both.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, round yon virgin, mother and child, holy infant soul, tender and mild, sleep in heavenly peace, sleep in heavenly peace. Everybody.
Have a great 73, and we'll all pray for peace. God bless you.
Next up, we'll be hearing from Army veteran Chad Windsor, who had a successful stellate ganglion block procedure and tells his story of how it helped him. Let's watch. We're joined here by Chad Windsor. Chad, you're joining us from Maui, Hawaii. Thank you so much for being with us today. We're talking about stellate ganglion block, and before we start talking about that conversation with you, tell us a little bit about your military service.
I was in the Army back in the early 90s and did my 4-year, 16-week contract and moved on with college.
So, Chad, we talked the other day about your experience with stellate ganglion block. I wanted to bring you on the show to tell us the story of how that went, because you had repeat procedures and it was kind of an interesting path that you were on. Can you kind of fill us in?
Yeah, I had struggled with PTSD for over 22 years. Didn't realize I had it for a long time. The main thing is I was having a real hard time sleeping and jumping up in the middle of the night, grabbed my wife. It got to the point where I had to sleep on the couch, and then I got even worse. I would jump up in the middle of the night and kick furniture and just destroy my life. So it got to a point I started looking online, just like normal people do nowadays, just Googling everything. And I came across Dr. Lipov, who was successful with his procedure. And I just dove deep on it and watched a lot of videos and decided to get the procedure done. And it seemed to work for a little bit. And as the years went on, I did the procedure again. Didn't work that great. And then it went on even more as far as the symptoms I was going through. And it got to a breaking point where I literally, worst thing I ever did, literally jumped out of a window when I was having a nightmare. And I was like, all right, I need to find out what's really going on here. There's got to be something deeper with the block procedure, because it seemed to work for a little bit. And that's when I had my big breakthrough, my big epiphany, when I found out there was a special forces guy that Dr. Lipov had treated, who had basically reached the end of his rope. He was suicidal, and Dr. Lipov basically pleaded with him, would you please consider doing the upgraded procedure, which is in a second location, and we'll see if it works. So he basically did that, and it worked. And so that was kind of my end-all be-all epiphany story, where I was like, all right, that's it. Because my first two procedures, utilizing the Lipov procedure, it only had one injection. And so because this gentleman had done 2 injections, 2 spots, I was like, all right, went ahead and got that procedure done, of all days, 9/11/2015. And ever since then, been sleeping like a baby.
So,
blessed.
Yeah, so you really hit a wall, but to just be clear, the first 2 procedures were not done by Dr. Lipov.
Correct.
And then the third procedure, you asked Dr. Lipov to consult with your treating physician. And
Correct.
He said, hey, I've been kind of working on this modification, and here's a way you can try it. What did you learn about the modification?
Well, mainly what I learned was that, as I was studying online, there's a couple of the doctors out there that are speaking on the autonomic nervous system, how basically it happens, you get a stuck fight or flight syndrome. And as I found out, as I was studying the nerves, I got really deep on the neurology of it, trying to understand for myself. I came across some other doctors, like, for example, Dr. Jerry Tennant, who is satisfied basically turning off the system through what's called a bowling ball syndrome. Most people that go through a trauma are stuck in in a sense, kind of like a karate position, like a ready to fight position. It never turns off. So he realized by doing what he does, it just deals with this part of the nervous system. It's just a matter of getting there, whatever it may be. He uses a device. Dr. Lipov uses a shot. It's all about getting in there and actually finding out what works. And so it appears to be the C6 and then the C3, and that right now is working for Dr. Lipov. I guess he's got over 90% success with it. So that was the end-all be-all, the second injection.
And we'll have a chance to ask Dr. Lipov about that for this episode. How soon after that injection did you feel different or feel a change?
Within like minutes. Yeah, it's basically shutting off your fight or flight. So your energy level, you just feel totally at peace. You can tell immediately, especially after the second injection. First injection, then you got to wait about an hour.
Have you noticed any side effects of any negative sides of the procedure?
Dr. Lipov will talk about the first thing, you get a little droopy eye, which is common with the injection. But other than that, you just got to be pretty mellow afterwards. As far as, I mean, you know, your body's going through a big change. So ideally, feel a little woozy afterwards, but it's good to be with some loved ones so you can kind of transition from that. You know, there's a big shift in energy. But other than that, I got outside, got fresh air, and just felt like, wow, I could feel a big difference. But it's important to, you know, have somebody take you home afterwards and just keep an eye on you. They usually keep an eye on you for about an hour or so afterwards.
That's really interesting, Chad, because I've been in the post-op with several of my patients, and some of them have had really strong emotional reactions right after the procedure, and it's always felt important to kind of be there and maybe bring their partners in whenever I can.
Correct.
Can you say more about that? Because I feel like that should be best practice for this.
Well, first and foremost, I think, you know, there's a lot of limiting beliefs in any kind of new procedure, so you got to be willing to just accept what is. You know, it's going to something be dramatic. So I think it's important if you're by yourself. I think the most important thing is to always have people around you for support, so you don't feel alone. I think that's the big problem here, is most people are giving up because they totally feel disconnected from everyone. So I think it's an important transition to always have that, and then just also to share the excitement, because you will definitely feel a huge shift. The thing is, like, how long will that, you know, last? So I think that's the most important thing, is what caused the problem, meaning that, you know, the fight or flight or freeze, that's the interesting thing about what really is happening, is the body's just frozen, stuck in that, you know, like karate position, if you were like, you know, ready to fight. And so I think when people transition, they need to be aware of like their circle, their influence, like what could bring it back, what's the trigger. So ideally, if they can change, if they could schedule a vacation, you know, get away from their normal rhythms, I think that would help in the transition. So start to develop more new patterns just overall. I think that's a pretty simple piece of advice.
Hey, Chad, for people that don't experience PTSD and don't understand, and that is such an awesome description you have, because that is what it feels like sometimes. You're stuck in this intense being, right? Was there any fear? Was there any fear that you were going to lose something, that you wouldn't be able to react the same way? That would be a natural fear for me.
Yeah. First thing, so we're talking about limiting belief. What are the limiting beliefs? You know, I went through that. First of all, you know, the procedure, it's a stellate ganglion block. It's been done since 1925. So when I found that out, I was like, what? I'm like, all right, that made me realize, all right, it's been done for a long time. And then the bottom line is, if you're exhausting your energy, you're going to be like totally just depleted. So this shuts that off, brings the body back to balance. So it sharpens you, makes you stronger.
Interesting.
And so that was the initial feel that I had, was like, all right, you know, what's this going to affect my abilities? Like, it's going to make you better. I mean, you think about the basics here, like the system's constantly getting stressed, constantly wasting energy. If you can shut that off and go back to balance, you're definitely going to be a sharper, you know, bigger, faster, stronger person. So I think it's pretty simple to understand.
Great.
And if someone's ready to give up already, which a lot of these guys are, like, what do they got to lose? You know what I mean? You got to it's all about those small wins, you know, especially when you're in a violent state. You know what I mean? You can make a little win. That's what keeps you alive. So they need to make a step forward and give it a chance. But I think a lot of these guys too, one of the things a lot of these guys, they just totally feel guilty. So that's an important thing to have other people around to help those people process that step. Because a lot of guys just feel like, wow, what I did was wrong, and you name it. So I think that's the biggest reason why a lot of these guys are giving up, just feel so guilty.
Chad, what have other people noticed about you? Any differences in
what else have I noticed,
personality? Yeah, what have other people told you about yourself in respect to any changes since you've had the procedure?
Usually the first thing is like, hey man, like you just feel a lot more chill. Like, you look great. You know, like you get like just basically you're finally giving off more positive energy. So you're not, you know, such on guard. And so people can really feel your energy shift, especially those that are close to you. And it's a blessing, because you're getting reflected back from them, like, oh yeah, you really think I look great, you know? And so yeah, you're getting that mirror effect where you're finally seeing the outcome of what you did is your close people in your circle, your family, can definitely see a change. It's really cool. It's very, it opens the conversation up, like, what'd you do? You know? Are you working out? What have you been doing? You know?
Yeah, I've had
So-
one of the common things that some people have said to me is, well, is this a Band-Aid that just blocks the symptoms? And honestly, you know, I was very skeptical about this at first, and I'm still kind of open-minded and watching and waiting to see how things develop. But one of the things that I observed is that guilt piece. I'm not sure that SGB targets that specifically, but what I did observe is that the shift in energy state allowed a lot of the therapy that we had done to really absorb and then further sink in after the procedure. And so it's not necessarily like do you get an injection or do you get therapy? It can sometimes be a part of a treatment plan, because continuing to work with people, I found they got some interesting effects after the procedure. Can you comment on some of that sort of personal growth after the procedure around any therapies that you participated in?
So what you're saying is what personal growth after getting out of that guilty feeling, is that what you're saying? It's that simple. Most people are stuck. There's energy blockages, and that's the main one. It's, you know, when you look at Chinese medicine, that's down in the lower dantian, as they say, where we store a lot of our energy. So a lot of guys, well, the people I've also come across that have also done the procedure, it's like, wow, it's like night and day. You're not feeling that same guilt. I mean, it's something that we all have to process on different levels, but I think that's the end all be all, is if you can help someone get through that processing, and then, you know, when they're stuck in their mind in the past about what they did, I think it's important for them to, you know, always catch themselves. You're either going to be in the present moment in your mind, or you're going to be thinking about the future. And if you can really teach them that, like, all right, it's time to let go of the past. I got rid of all my uniforms, any little things that would remind me of, like, you know, some of those things that were associated with, you know, that equipment that I had. I think that's a big important step too, is maybe let go of that old identity. A lot of guys, you know, want to, you know, people to, you know, recognize what they did. And so I think it's good to kind of let go of the past in that way, and then just choose a new identity. You know, stop talking about the military, stop talking about what happened in the past, and let go of the story, because that's really what people, you know, have not realized. That story was how they were getting attention. It's how they were coping. So it's important to let that go and move forward with new identity, and the guilt goes away, so you're not constantly, you know, thinking about it. I think that's one of the easiest methods rather, to just get out of that association. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, it sort of paves the path for personal growth, but maybe, I don't know that it's been, in my experience, the direct thing that causes that growth. Like, it still needs to be processed, as you said. To me, it seems to just prime people for that kind of a change in their life. And so that's where I think continued work, you know, it becomes really important.
So Chad, if another veteran was interested in stellate ganglion block, what would you say to that veteran to encourage them to go forward with the procedure, or at least to give thought to considering it?
First of all, I would definitely watch as many videos as possible. That Dr. Liphoff has been on the show, The Doctors, like over 11 episodes. That really helps see other people's stories, and it's not just veterans. And also just get them to look at, you can actually get a picture now of PTSD. It's called a SPECT brain scan by the famous Dr. Amen. So they now can actually show you a picture of what PTSD looks like. So that really kind of quantifies or gives you an objective picture that you can show yourself and your loved ones that you actually have the condition, that you're basically stuck in, you know, fight or flight. It's that simple. And then also is that, you know, it's not that expensive. You know what I mean? It's pretty simple to do, and basic procedure's been done since 1925, and we're talking about, like, you know, just like almost like getting your blood drawn. So it's pretty basic procedure. It's nothing. Yeah, it's a good step in the right direction. Easy to do.
Chad, I want to go back a minute
to
some. I think something you said that sounded to me to be very profound, and that was to let go of the past to a certain extent. And so many of our young service members that go in directly out of high school don't have any other identity. They could have been anything in high school. They might have been the, you know, king of homecoming, or they might have just been, you know, a regular Joe in the band, who knows? But they didn't have any identity until they went into the military. And I found it interesting that you would say, and profound that you would say, that for some it might be really good just to get rid of that. Find your real identity. It's not what you became when you were there, but it's what you're going to become afterwards, and try to let go of that. I don't think we talk about that enough.
Yeah, that's a really important, it's all about, so what's happening is this is just triggering transformation. So it's the fight or flight, finally opening up that person to like, why am I here? Who am I? And so on a spiritual level, that's for everyone to choose, what they believe in. So once again, who's in your circle? Who's there to influence you, on a spiritual level to take that path? I think it's all about getting a mentor. That's the most important thing of all this, having a mentor. So usually it's looked at as a doctor, but like, how about somebody that can, cover more than just the body? Like, what about the spiritual side? So I think that's the bottom line. You got to have a mentor that you trust, like a real hero, to guide you. It's supposed to be our mom or dad, but sometimes they don't see that. So
who's your mentor?
My mentor is my father. He's one of them. There's more than one though. That's the concept here, having many mentors. You can have a main one for guidance. But yeah, my father's my first mentor. And then I have quite a few mentors that, on a private side, they're there for me. And they've given me a lot of guidance. Or you can go on an indirect side, which a lot of people are doing. You can have them online, where you're following them through, learning through video or even through books. So they call that a silent mentor. So that's another avenue. So you can find a way, the conversation to be, you got to have someone guide you.
I just want to ask you one last question, which is there anything else that you want to share about your experience with Stellate Ganglion Block?
I just want people to be understanding that it's a developing procedure, meaning it's growing. And so that was a blessing for everyone involved to be teachable. I think when you look at what's really happening, it's just the sympathetic nervous system's stuck. And there's many people that are aware of like how to basically turn it off. And this is one of many procedures. I think it's really important to also talk about Dr. Amen with the SPECT scan to help people give a picture of what PTSD looks like. And then also Dr. Jerry Tennant, who's now developed procedures to turn off the fight or flight in many other parts of the body too. For example, the psoas muscle and the various organs that have been opened up. So it's exciting. People need to be open, and we're all collectively trying to get one thing accomplished, and that's to help people, gain freedom, get back on track.
Amen.
Well, Chad, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate your military service, and thank you for sharing all of your insight perspective on Stellate Ganglion Block. We'll come visit you in Maui sometime.
Absolutely. I'll see you tomorrow.
Aloha, guys. Yeah.
All right.
Always
Thank you.
Aloha. See you guys.
We sincerely thank Chad Windsor for sharing his experiences with us tonight. And again, a thank you to both Dr. Lipov and Dr. McLean, who took the time to educate us about this procedure and share their professional experiences.
Up next, Shauna Springer had a chance to talk with Elliot McKenzie, an up-and-coming R&B singer and Marine Corps veteran. Elliot, an Iraq War veteran, uses music as a form of therapy for PTSD. His music and on-stage performances are a form of release and calming for his condition. Through using music as therapy, Elliot has found a way to save his own life. We hope you enjoy this.
All right, good morning, Elliot. Elliot McKenzie joining us today on Veterans Voices, a fellow Los Angelino. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you? I'm good.
Good, good. So Elliot's a Marine Corps veteran, and he's an up-and-coming R&B artist. Done some really interesting pieces of music. And we just wanted to have a conversation with him today about a little bit about his time in the Marine Corps, but mostly, what lights you up now. So tell us a little bit about your time in the Marine Corps, Elliot.
So I joined the Marine Corps in 2003, right after I graduated high school. While I was in the Marine Corps, I was selected for security forces. And in security forces, I served on a FAST team. FAST stands for Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team. For about 6 months. And then from there, I went to presidential support duty, which is about 1% of the Marine Corps selected to help guard the President of the United States. And I was lucky enough to be part of that 1%. I did that for about a year and a half. And then after those two jobs, I was put into my primary job, which was an infantry Marine, a rifleman. And I was put at Camp Pendleton, California. And with 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, I went to Iraq, Ramadi, Iraq in 2005, and then I went on the 31st MEU, which is in Okinawa, Japan in 2006. And then I got out of the Marine Corps in 2007.
All right, well, tell us about your transition out of the Marine Corps, the time after the Marine Corps, whatever you want to share.
So I got out of the Marines in 2007, and I got out because I actually got accepted to go to a college out here in California in Los Angeles called Musicians Institute, because I had already known that I wanted to do music. I had actually recorded my, an amateur album, I guess you can say, while I was in Okinawa, Japan in 2006, and with other Marines. And so I got out because I got accepted to that school, and I went to that school and I learned a lot about how to, become an entrepreneur in the music industry. And then I struggled for a while. After that, I tried to chase the dream of doing music full time, and didn't really have a full set of income coming in, didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do, exactly how I wanted to achieve my goals. So I call it my gray area. I was lost. A lot of veterans go through this where they get out of the military and they're lost, So I was in that gray area for a while.
How did you come out of that gray area? What was the thing or the realization that you had that kind of propelled you forward?
So in 2008, that's when I say things really hit the fan in a negative way. My PTSD actually I ended up homeless. I almost ended up in prison because of it. And so what changed everything was, while I was recovering from all that, I was seeing a counselor at the vet center out here in California. And the counselor that I was seeing gave me some really, really sound advice. And she told me, one of the things she told me was, why don't you use your music as therapy? Because I had explained to her that I've been doing music since I was a kid, and I was a singer and a drummer and this and that. And she said, why don't you try to chase those dreams you've been chasing and use that as a form of therapy? And so in doing that, I ended up finding a way out of my gray area.
Thank you for that, Elliot. There's two things I love about what you just said. The first is that therapy can be life-saving if you have the right doc. And if you have the right doc, that person is going to give you some sound counsel that's based on understanding who you are as a warrior and as a man. And so I really appreciate, that you kind of talked about how therapy has been beneficial, for you. So then tell us about the next steps. Like when you grabbed a hold of that and you said, music is going to be part of my therapy and my life. What happened next?
So what I did next was I saved up about $2,500, and I went out and I purchased a computer. I purchased and recording studio equipment, and I put together a recording studio in my bedroom at home. And I basically just sat at home and I taught myself how to record music, how to make it sound good, how to mix it, how to master it, things like that. And then I started networking. I started finding out who else in the Los Angeles area is a musician, who else does what I'm trying to do, who can I network with to try to make this a bigger thing for me. And so, I spent about, I want to say, like 2 or 3 years doing that. And then I built up a good product. And then last year was when I finally hit the point where I felt like I was a professional at what I was doing.
Yep. You went pro.
Yeah, unofficially went pro, I guess is what you can say, is when I started releasing music officially, like on iTunes and SoundCloud and Apple Music and things like that. And then I started getting booked for concerts and I started getting paid for what I was doing. So last year was really when things really started going in a direction where I've wanted them to go for so long now.
I think that what's really important about your story is that for so many people who kind of become somebody and really make something of themselves, there's this like hidden period of time where they're just laboring in privacy and obscurity, and that takes tenacity and persistence. So a question I have for you is, how do you bring who you are as a Marine to that period of your life when you weren't known and you were struggling and working to build something, but nobody knew who you were at that time?
I think the biggest thing that helped me as far as what I brought out of being a Marine was the extremely high discipline level that the Marine Corps gives all of its members.
Yep.
When you go through recruit training to become a Marine, 98% of what you're doing that entire 3 months in recruit training is building discipline in different ways and through different experiences. And it was that discipline that I gained through not only recruit training and becoming a Marine, but my time in the Marine Corps, that really taught me how to actually get things done and not just talk about what I wanted to do, but actually execute the mission and get things done that would help me make progress in my music career.
That's right. I'm always telling people that there's like ways to be a warrior in other fields of work, you know, and that it's so important to help vets transition by helping understand what it looks like to be a warrior in whatever profession they choose. So tell us about some of your music, Elliot. What were you thinking as you wrote it? Anything you want to share?
Okay, so the first song and music video that really kind of like went, I don't want to say viral, but it got popular amongst the veteran community and just the communities in general was Gunshots, which was released last year. Gunshots was a song that I had in the back of my mind for quite some time. And I wanted to write it because I wanted two things to happen. I wanted to be able to use it as a form of education for civilians who might not be aware of what combat PTSD is. And then I also wanted it to be able to be a form of therapy for the combat veterans and veterans who have PTSD who watch it. And so that was pretty much the first time I really was able to put my experiences as a Marine and my personal PTSD experience into music and into a music video.
What do you want civilians to pick up on when they watch Gunshots?
I want them to pick up on the small stuff. Like, for instance, the biggest scene that I feel like matters for civilians in that video is the scene where the veteran is in the store and the guy drops the mug and the mug hits the ground. And to everybody else, it's just a mug hitting the ground. But to a combat vet, that mug hitting the ground multiple times and rotating on the ground might sound like like a firefight, like rounds hitting around him. And so there's a scene where that happens and then the guy ducks behind the counter. So if something like that happens to you and you see a veteran ducking behind the counter because a balloon popped or because something sounded similar to gunshots, or even like 4th of July on fireworks or for fireworks, just be aware that that stuff happens. And I wanted it to be a form of education to visually show people what we go through as combat veterans.
Yeah, you know, I watched your video and it's interesting you pick out that particular scene because what you see and you captured so well is the nonverbals of everybody else around kind of withdraws, not approaches.
Right.
And they look like kind of shocked about the reaction that the veteran has. And I agree, man, I think if people understood that, then maybe we could approach and just not be, not pull back, you know? I thought you really captured that.
Thank you, thank you. I actually wrote that. I wrote the entire video, I produced the entire video, I directed the entire video, and I did that on purpose because I actually did it from my personal experience. That scene actually happened to me. Except my personal experience was a kid that popped a balloon in a Vons, and I ducked behind a tomato counter. So I wanted to take my personal experience and kind of alter it a little bit for the video, and then showcase that in the video. Yeah,
it felt authentic to me for sure. Anything else before we end for today?
My website is ElliotMcKenzie.com. 2 L's and 2 T's in Elliot, so ELLIOTTMCKENZIE.com. You could reach me on there. All my social media connections are on there. There's photos, my music is on there, videos. So basically it's like everything about me and what I do is on that website in case you want to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us today. It was really fun to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
Here are a few resources that we'd like to share before we go. Are you a male veteran interested in talking about self-care among other veterans? Returning veterans of Diablo Valley will be hosting meetings once per month in Danville. Visit returningvetsofdiablovalley.org to learn more. Operation Care and Comfort supports troops, veterans, and families while serving in conflict regions, while serving on humanitarian missions, and when they return home. Visit occ-usa.org to learn more.
Team Rubicon unites skills and experiences of military veterans with first responders of rapidly deploying emergency response teams to disaster-affected areas. Please visit teamrubiconusa.org to learn more.
To rewatch tonight's episode, check back on our homepage later this week or check your cable provider's schedule for rebroadcast times. You can also rewatch this episode and many others on our YouTube channel, Veterans Voices of Contra Costa, so be sure to subscribe. Our next live broadcast will be Monday, January 21st at 7 p.m., and we will discuss the small things that bring a taste of home to those deployed overseas. Be sure to tune in. This is Veterans Voices of Contra Costa County, wishing you all happy holidays, and please enjoy this holiday carol that our Veterans Voices staff sang for all of our viewers out there.
Deck the halls with boughs of holly, fa la 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 la. 'Tis the season to be jolly, fa la 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 la. Don we now our gay apparel, fa la 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 la. Troll the ancient Yuletide carol, fa la 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 la.
Happy holidays!
Merry Christmas!
Happy holidays!
Merry Christmas! Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right.
Single take, baby. That's us. Single take. Hey, Merry Christmas. Oh, happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Stellate Ganglion Block. A second shot.
Stand by.
Other side of the neck.
I need glasses. It's getting harder.
As long as Rudolph's happy.
Camera 2.
Blip, 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 blip. Stellate Ganglion. Can't we just say SGB?
I thought it was perfect.
No, you always screw it up, man.
You were beautiful.
Chris,
Bye. Bye.
his head won't fit in the screen.
Do we want to have Kevin practice? Because that's really where our weakness is here.
4, 3.
It's true.
I feel like I'm doing mine, you know? I feel like my part's
I
good.
feel like if you quit talking, we'd get through this faster. Yeah, sure, of course.
Yeah, put your hand a little higher so you get even more of the microphone.
Bah humbug. Bah humbug. We wanted to sincerely thank Chad Windsor for sharing his experiences with us tonight and again.
We done? You happy? Are you happy and relaxed back there?